Excited to welcome back to the program after a few months to give us an update on the campaign in the last stretch before the New York primaries. Candidate for New York's 9th District, Isaiah James, welcome back to the Damage Report.
Thank you so much, John, for having me. It's great to be here under the circumstances.
Exactly. Both of us in our homes, not necessarily where we expected to be at this particular point, but before we went live, we were talking a bit about some of the struggles of running a race, and the last time we spoke was long before this. So, tell me a little bit about how you've had to adapt your campaign to, the new situation where some of the traditional ways you'd be running just aren't available to you or aren't safe.
Well, everything has basically moved online. Literally from every ad, every video, it's all online. We don't have any human contact because New York, the whole country was on pause. And for me, my strongest suit is campaigning, is getting out there, talking to the people. And the grassroots campaign is all about getting out there and taking your message to the people. And when you literally can't do that by order of the governor, it makes it really difficult to compete. And another thing, raising money for a grassroots candidate when folks are broke is really, really hard because we don't have PAC donations or lobbyist donations. We don't have rich donors. We have literally, the delivery driver, the teacher who chips in $5 and $10. And it's hard for me as somebody who's a working class guy, whose wife is a teacher, to ask people, hey, can you give me $27? Knowing what we're all going through.
Yeah.
So it's been a struggle all around.
Yeah, I can only imagine. We're an independent organization. We face the same thing. It's like we don't want to fall apart as some media companies are, but we also feel terrible asking people. We know, 40 million people are out of work. But to that, you've been campaigning while the response has been going on. I am interested in your opinion of how both the federal response in terms of where the money has gone, what you think about that. But I'm also curious, being a New Yorker, what do you think about the way that the pandemic and some of the recent protests, what the New York response has been to that?
Well, let's start at the federal level. The federal response has been abysmal, absolutely abysmal. Our federal leadership they literally have their ostriches with their hands in the dirt. Thank God for the few people, the Dr. Anthony Fauci's and the director of the CDC, who, had a modicum of sway on our current commander in chief to try to at least nudge him in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
The Defense Production Act, we could have been rolling out ventilators. Thousands of more people could be alive right now. We could have told industry, hey, we need PPE and we need it now. We need tests. We could have used the Defense Production Act to ramp up. Think about this. In World War II, we were turning out a bomber, a B-24 bomber every hour. A bomber is huge. We could have used the industry of America to save thousands of more lives, number one. Number two, had we shut down the damn country when the experts told us to, thousands of more people would have been alive right then and there. And number three, had we had a coordinated federal response. Listen, the first thing they teach you going in the Army is you don't go into battle with 50 different plans. That's why we have a structure and a chain of command. If we actually had one of those in place, one person overseeing all of this stuff who can delegate to other people below them, then the response would have been more swift and a lot better. That's number one. On the state side of it, we had the same damn thing in New York. It was people with their heads in the sand. I remember the governor and the mayor were arguing about when to close schools. We're not going to close schools. We're going to close schools. Like, really? And meanwhile, teachers are getting sick and dying in our community. You can go back and look up the clips. The governor saying this is not going to be that bad. Go about, live your life. It's all okay. Same thing with the mayor. And at that time, John, you can look on my Twitter. I was publicly saying, no, shut this down. If you know anything about a virus, it does not move linear. It moves exponential. And in New York City, where 8.5 million people live ass to elbow, it's going to spread really, really fast. But our leaders were inept, and it cost lives.
Yeah. Tragically. And of course continues to. It's not, as big of a news story, but of course about 1,000 people are still dying every day. And we're hoping that as things reopen, we won't see us dip back into that same situation. Obviously, another big issue that's been dominating news is the protests around police brutality. And I know that you have a background of community activism around some of these issues involving criminal justice and things like that. I'm curious how that's affecting your campaign, how it's influenced your platform, your experience in these areas.
Well, I'm proud to say that it hasn't influenced my platform because we've been talking about this since day one. We haven't jumped on the bandwagon of criminal justice reform and, justice and equality for everybody. Folks can go back and look from day one. Some of the first videos we put out in this campaign, we were talking about these things because for me, as a 6'8" Black man, I know what it's like to look like a suspect when you walk out of the front door. And I'm a decorated veteran. So this stuff is lived experiences. We've been talking about this. What has encouraged me by these protests is I'm seeing the milieu of New York. I'm seeing Black, white, brown, old, young, affluent, rich, poor. I'm seeing everybody coalesce and say, listen, what happened to George Floyd wasn't just one officer with his knee on the neck of a man.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to George Floyd was the entire system of racist criminal justice on the necks of Black people for hundreds of years in this country. And finally, those cries are now being heard. And once the people have woken up, you can't put them back to sleep because no matter what, this will be written about in history. I've never seen anything like this. And I'm 33, but I've never seen anything like this where all over the entire world, that one man sparked his death, his murder wasn't a death, he was murdered. His murder sparked a awakening and a consciousness and people that Black people have been screaming about in our echo chamber of pain for the last 400 years. And now the world is starting to see what we were talking about.
Yeah. You've talked about your background in this area, and I know there's obviously a lot that differentiates you between you and the current incumbent. I know in this area, you've stressed that through all of the years that Yvette Clarke has held this position, she hasn't actually sponsored any legislation to deal with this area of policy. Do you think that that's something that now people will be focusing more on, considering what's going on?
I would hope so. I mean, one of the biggest problems we have in not just New York City, but all over the country is something called the 1033 program. It allows the Pentagon to sell billions of dollars of surplus military equipment to police departments across this nation. So let's look at the system here. My member of Congress takes hundreds of thousands of dollars from the defense industry, from defense contractors. When they get those new contracts for government equipment to build, where do you think their surplus equipment goes? It goes right to states like New York, right to states like Florida and Washington and Michigan. So she is part of the problem. She is literally shoveling the dirty coal into the big Leviathan that is the military industrial complex, which spills over into our racist criminal injustice system. It trickles down into Black and brown communities. And she is Black herself. And I don't understand that. Why is this so hard to understand? It's my job as a candidate to connect the dots of how that dirty money is planted as a seed and how it matures into the tree of oppression that people live under every single day. And she has no remorse about it. She says she never took a purity test. So listen, I always say, if your integrity can be bought for a $2,800 donation, that's between you and your God, but mine can't.
Yeah. There's one other area I wanted to ask, considering your background. You've served in the military. We've had instances where Trump has deployed the National Guard. There's been obviously not just talk about, militarization of the police, of this equipment being sent to Iraq, but then coming home and being used by police around the country, but also the potential role for the military in putting down these protests. As someone who's obviously very supportive of the goals of the protests, has served in the military, what do you think about this use of the military, whether in fact or just in rhetoric, that the right is saying that it might be necessary to quell the protests?
Well, in fact and in rhetoric, it is both utterly disgusting and wrong. That's number one. Number two, I understand what the internal pain that the people are having when they're inside the military. Once you sign on that dotted line, you literally sign your life away. There is no freedom of speech. There is no freedom of dissent. If they give you an order and you don't do it, you will go to jail right then and right there. I've seen it happen a million times. So I understand the internal consternation that they have. But me being on the outside now, I can speak about it. Hell no, we shouldn't use the military. First of all, what about, you can't just suspend posse comitatus. You can't just suspend, the Third Amendment. I don't think Trump's ever read the Constitution, number one, but other lawmakers should know that this is illegal. You can't use the military as police. He might try to bring up the Insurrection Act that George Washington used or something like that. But these are old, antiquated laws that were used to put down slave rebellions.
Yeah.
That's basically what this is. So we have a standing military. So we don't need police with military equipment, number one. And number two, no governor at all should deploy the National Guard, because Trump does not have control over the National Guard. That's states. Trump has control over the regular active duty military. And I would hope that my brothers and sisters who are still in uniform would know not to carry out these orders. They are lawful or they're unlawful, they're illegal. Do not do it.
Yeah. Couldn't agree with you more. Where can people find out more about your campaign, your experience, and your platform?
Well, folks can go to IsaiahForCongress.com, ISIAH, or Congress.com, and they can read my platform, my life story, all that stuff. They can sign up to volunteer for us, and all the same social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Isaiah James for the 9th District, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and stay safe.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.